Tremendous. Thank you very much. We're very, very fortunate to have the Honorable John Podesta participating in our Global Security Forum. You probably know John has a very long and distinguished record of public service. He was Chief of Staff to President Clinton, where I had the pleasure of working with him. He was counselor to President Obama on climate issues. He's now President Biden's senior advisor for clean energy innovation, where he oversees implementation of the climate provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. And recently, President Biden gave him the second full-time job, appointing him as senior advisor for international climate policy. When John is not in government making policy, he is out of government advocating passionately for policy. For those of us who have worked with him know John to be incredibly efficient, candid, a great sense of humor, action-oriented, but I'd say most importantly, he does not shy away from intellectual engagement on issues. And I think that is what makes John so effective as a policy advocate and a policy maker. So welcome, John. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Alan. I'm having a little trouble here in the White House. You'd think we'd have the best technology in the world, but my computer broke down, so I borrowed someone else's desk. I hope you can hear me okay.
We can hear you fine, John. It's good to see you again. Thanks. John, this is a global security forum, and I do want to get your views on the security implications of climate change. But I want to start with your responsibilities for containing global warming, because the easiest way to contain the national security implications of climate change is to contain global warming. President Biden has endorsed international efforts to keep alive the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 Celsius degrees. You are now charged with leading U.S. diplomatic efforts to achieve that. So I think my first question to you is, how optimistic are you that that goal is still achievable, and what are the main obstacles to achieving it?
Well, yeah, Alan, that's a big question. And I tell you, I want to start with how did we set that goal of trying to be 1.5 aligned in the world? It goes back to the success of the Obama administration in forging consensus and securing the Paris Agreement. In 2015, when that was signed, the Conference of Parties asked the world's best scientists, the IPCC, to study the question of the difference between what does a 2°C world look like, which is what we were trying to manage to, then what does a 1.5°C world look like. And the report that came out in 2018 cataloged the catastrophic damage to the natural world and the attendant, kind of knock-on effects that would to human security that would result if we didn't try to strive for 1.5. That led to another decision, which was that by the middle of this century, we had to be taking as much carbon out of the atmosphere as we were putting into it. That was an audacious challenge, but one that I think, given the stark difference, as I said, to what would happen to natural systems, to the effect on species loss, to the effect on food and water systems, the world sort of aligned and began to strive for. In Dubai, in the COP28 that just passed, I think the world's community came to the agreement that we needed to try to stick with that 1.5 degree or get as close to it as we could to create a safe and secure future for our planet and for our children. And I think the president took that quite seriously when he came into office. Of course, the former president got out of Paris. The president rejoined the Paris Agreement. He set a goal for the United States, a so-called NDC, nationally determined commitment, of reducing our emissions by 50 to 52%, was able to secure and pass the Inflation Reduction Act, which does the lion's share of the work of getting us to that point. And of course, we've used all the tools that we have available to us in the United States to be able to meet that commitment to the world of reducing those emissions by that level on our path towards net zero by 2050. So your question is, can we get there? How are we doing? And I'd say at a global level, we're off track. The stock take that occurred in Dubai indicated that. The mechanism of the Paris Agreement to constantly push countries to increase their ambition is at work. In February of next year, in February of 2025, countries need to come forward with new nationally determined commitments. I was just in China. We'll probably get to that. But, we discuss where we were respectively on that, and I can talk a little bit more about how we're seeing the number one emitter, China, doing in that regard. But what we need to do in order to have credibility at the global level is to make sure the United States is on track. So we will be coming forward with a 1.5 aligned 2035 goal that's economy-wide and covers all greenhouse gases. Sorry, you asked a big question. I gave you a long-winded answer. I apologize.
That's very helpful, John, and I do want to ask you about China. China has come up a lot, as you would expect, during a global security forum. I know you were just there. I know you were able to have productive conversations with the Chinese on climate during the Obama administration. So how is that conversation going now, and how much is it affected by tension in other parts of our relationship?
Well, the truth is that, we're in a very different place even than we were in 2014 when we were negotiating for a joint announcement that really kickstarted the Paris negotiations. More friction in the relationship on the security front, on the economic front. That tension has spilled into our respective attitudes about how we're building those technologies and investing in the future. We're overly dependent on China, for example, particularly in the field of batteries that power electric vehicles and upstream technologies that power the solar supply chain. And we have a lot of tension in the relationship. On the other hand, I think when President Biden and President Xi met near San Francisco last fall, when they met in Bali earlier in his presidency, I think they agreed that we have to try to continue to keep this line of communication open, try to take parallel actions where we can for both the good of our own citizens as well as for the good of the world. So Secretary Kerry led that effort and landed an important agreement and a work plan last fall at a meeting that he did with his counterpart Xi Jinping in China. This line of communication has remained open, notwithstanding other places that have gotten more friction-filled, let me put it that way. So I think we're trying to understand each other and find places where, as I said, we can, they push us, we push them, but it's important that we keep talking. We had, I think, some constructive and positive conversations around non-CO2 gases, which are important. They make up about half of the current global warming, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, et cetera. We think that they're the number one emitter by far now in the world. They are doing significant deployment of renewable energy. They set a target of deploying 1,200 gigawatts by 2030. They met that 6 years early. We pushed them to come up with a new target, be as ambitious, and make sure that generation capacity is also tied to the grid and dispatched. We pushed them on their 2035 NDC. We think China has essentially peaked, whether it's last year, this year, or next year, and there might be some year-to-year variation. They're in the process of peaking, and again, the deployment of the renewable energy, along with they're building out a significant amount of nuclear power. They're retiring some of their oldest industrial sources of emissions. That their natural trajectory is in a downward direction now. But in order for them to be 1.5 aligned and to meet a target they've set to be net zero by 2060, we have pressed them that they need to be showing cuts on the order of 30% off their peak by 2035. So they don't necessarily agree with that, but we are pressing the case, and of course, they're pressing the case for more action on our side. They still have too much coal in their system, and they're still building new coal. There's generally one of the biggest tensions in our overall bilateral relationship is the overcapacity they built. That's, I think, a result to some extent of for those of you who are discussing this in granular terms, their economy softened significantly as a result of COVID and the collapse of the real estate market. They're trying to compensate for that by a manufacturing and export-led, and in our view, using unfair trade practices to do so, to build growth into their economy. But what I think needs to happen is they need to stop relying on the coal they're continuing to build and begin to reduce the level of coal in their fleet. And rely on the resources that they are doing, but do it in a way that is globally fair. As you have observed, our view is shared by Europe, that's levying tariffs on their EV, on imported EVs from China, on Canada, which has done the same thing, in Chile and Turkey. I think people are feeling the bite of their overcapacity. And so even as we're kind of trying to find, as I said, places to cooperate where we can, including in the international sphere, where we continue to level our complaints against current industrial and trade practices in the interests of our country and I think our friends.
John, I think your comments give us a very good sense of the importance of limiting global warming, but also the challenges in actually achieving that. And so that, I think, just underscores the importance of understanding the national security implications of climate change. Defense Secretary Austin has said that climate change, global warming, is an existential threat to our national security. And I'd appreciate your views on the nexus, the main issues. And since we have so many representatives of the military here with us, how you think the military is doing in terms of assessing, anticipating, and preparing for climate change.
Thanks for the question, Alan. And when you and I worked together in the White House, I think you might remember this, but Gail Smith, who was then our senior director for Africa, went into the briefing room one day and said that climate change and global health were national security risks, and she almost got laughed out of the briefing room. Later went on to serve as the head of USAID. Fast forward to 2014, when the Pentagon, for the first time in its National Defense Review, recognized climate change as a threat multiplier. I now think of climate change as the threat. If we look at the extreme weather going on around the world, the particular effect that it has on particularly weak and states and the least developed countries, places like the Horn of Africa, the Middle East, other places. You see the devastation that it wrought, that it wrecks on human security. The vector by which that's all transmitted is to increase the threat of conflict between states, particularly fragile states, and causes a tremendous amount of dislocation, human migration, irregular migration, both internally in countries and across borders. It stresses and taxes security forces within those countries. And I could walk through just this last summer and talk about the extreme weather events that had those disproportional effects in, from the Philippines and Myanmar to now Central Europe to the extreme heat in our desert Southwest and in the Americas. That's just the shape of things to come. If you look at the projections of what will be happening in 2030, 2040, the effects on population movement, that puts huge stress on the security architecture and the ability to create resilient societies really across the globe. Later today, the U.S. will be issuing a new U.S. framework on climate resilience and security, which takes account of that analysis and calls for increased coordination at the interagency level, at the federal level, to access climate-related threats and opportunities, to build up our intelligence around that. We've already, I think, taken strong steps in the Biden-Harris administration to do so, to partner across borders. We had a very successful version of that in the last NATO summit meeting here, but to partner at the national, regional, and local levels as well, and to invest in collective resilience. We anticipate, again, just from an economic perspective, this can be devastating to our own country, but also devastating across the globe. Again, that puts pressure on security structures. We're not investing enough in forecasting, in building resilience, and trying to lessen the overall effects of climate change, and we need to turn our attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, John. John, I don't want to have you leave us without commenting on your other role in the White House, and that's overseeing implementation of the green provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know how critical successful implementation is to the achievement of our carbon zero emission targets. So there has been some criticism that implementation is too slow. There has been other criticism that implementation requires the government to pick winners and losers in the marketplace. What's your reaction to those criticisms? How do you see the process? And what are some successes that you can say you've already got under your belt?
Well, the good news is there's always 1,000 critics. Look, I feel pretty good about where we are. This has been the largest investment in clean energy and climate change, not just in the history of the United States, but in the history of the world. We've seen more than $420 billion worth of announced investments in the United States in clean energy and clean energy supply chains, and that vital EV and battery supply chain that I was talking about earlier. We've seen $100 billion worth of investments in deployment of clean power, more than that. We, for the first time last year, solar was the largest amount of new generation capacity installed in the U.S. This year, if you look at all the announcements by utilities across the country, 96% of all new generation will be zero carbon clean. That includes some new nuclear capacity that just came online in Georgia, but largely the lion's share of that is in the renewable space. We have, there's the Inflation Reduction Act itself was government enabled, but it's really private sector led. It was the largest share of the investments are coming through the tax code and support in the tax code. And 21 out of 24 of those tax credits, they are of long duration, and the guidance is already out from the Treasury Department, and people are taking advantage of that. And as I said, building these projects really all across the country, north, south, east, and west. The Climate Power estimates in its count that more than 330,000 good jobs have already been created just since the IRA passed in August of 22. There's a significant amount of grant money that is going through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act to both to demonstrate new technology and help communities be able to develop ground-up approach to lower their emissions. That is all going, I think, well. About 70% of that of the money that is available to be awarded has been awarded, and we're on track for over 90% of that money to be awarded and obligated during the rest of this year. We just today have announced another $3 billion of investments in advanced batteries and new technology, along with the supply chain, including critical minerals. That will leverage $16 billion worth of private investment behind it. So I think what you're seeing is this has been really a strong part of the strength of the fact that we have performed better than any of the other developed economies in the world coming out of COVID. We now have inflation back near the Fed's target level. That's why they just cut 50 basis points on the rate this week. And at the same time, we've seen investments in this clean energy space double as a percentage of overall GDP growth. So I think this is a remarkable achievement. And as I said, from a climate perspective, most importantly, putting us on the path to be able to make good on our commitment to cut our emissions by 50%. It's accompanied, as I noted earlier, by strong regulations from EPA, from efficiency standards from the Department of Energy. But I think that, there's the success is in the jobs being created, the construction going up. We've had month after month after month of growth in construction jobs. Manufacturing construction is at really a high that we haven't seen in 50 years. And that's, those jobs are coming along, and many of them are union jobs, which we're also excited to see. So we've had stronger growth in the clean energy space among unionization than we've seen in other elements of our particularly private sector society. So I'm feeling pretty good about it.
So, John, we thank you for your time. You've got two incredibly important jobs, and how you do on those two jobs is going to affect all of us in our personal lives, but it's also going to affect our national security. So thank you for all your efforts, and thanks for joining us here.
Alan, thank you, and the members of the military there, thanks for your service. I think it's really important that you're holding this conference and really focusing on these issues. So thanks for letting me barge in for a few minutes.
Good to see you, John.
Bye.